Hey everyone! Today I'm going to teach you how to do a long beaded pendant that has a beautiful beaded tassel all embellished at the end of it. And then this is all going to be suspended from SilverSilk flat mesh. I love this design. It is very easy to make. This can be a great project if you've got leftover beads in your bead soup or your secret stash that you have hidden away. And again, just works up really quickly. If you are looking for the materials on this design, you can check out the video description. Welcome to my channel. My name is Nilay Patel. I'm the owner, designer, and educator at SilverSilk and more. And before we get started with tonight's project, I want you guys to do two things. First is destroy that subscribe button to my SilverSilk YouTube channel. On there, you'll find a ton of tutorials for all kinds of SilverSilk, whether it be flat mesh, pearlesque chain, capture chain, all the above. Second is if you're looking for even more project ideas or just some processes behind how SilverSilk is made, you can follow my Instagram. There you'll find lots of reels, pictures, inspirations, all kinds of goodies that your creative mind will want to absorb. So let's go ahead and just get started. Alrighty, I have some tools that I like to talk about first before even diving into the materials and the process of how things are made. So let me cover those real quick. Here I've got my favorite pair of cutters. These are my Lindstrom wire cutters. I use these for capture chain, for beading wire, for craft wire, and time again, they still end up being really sharp and my best pair of pliers to use, so I recommend them for you guys. I've got a pair of chain nose, a pair of round nose, and a pair of wide flat nose pliers that have been dipped in Tool Magic. These are all from Weber's, and Weber's is one of my favorite tool brands as well. Their tools are just excellent quality, and I use these three for practically everything. So I recommend having them in your toolbox as well. As for materials, you'll want some jewelry chain. This is going to be used toward our tassel. I actually have some cut up already on the side, but I just wanted to give you guys an example of the type of chains that you can pick out. There's a ton of different types of chains out there that you can pick. It doesn't even have to be something that's already beaded. It could just be a really cool shape, links that have been connected together. It could be thin or it could be thick chain. That's really up to you guys and your creativity. I think that's one of my favorite things about making this tassel is how open-ended your design can be with this technique that I'll show you. So have some jewelry chain from your stash pulled out to the side. Next, I talked about having some flat mesh. So this is gold flat mesh. This is a fairly newer product in my collection, in my SilverSilk lines. This is involving making a knitted wire sleeve that is roughly about 5 millimeters in diameter. And when it goes through the machine and then also coming out of a second apparatus that flattens it into a 5 millimeter chain in width, and it is absolutely stunning, gorgeous, very sturdy, and still flexible because of that knitting that happens. And it's just a very, I think the gold especially is very luxurious and robust. It's very strong as well. So typically it comes in a 5-foot spool, and this particular design doesn't require a clasp. So I would just recommend having a size that you feel would be comfortable to just throw over your head. In this case, I think I'm using close to about 30 inches, which is a pretty good size necklace that you can work with. So I recommend that. I had mentioned also that you can have some really fun design work with just some orphan beads. So I picked these out because it was sort of a springier, summery palette. So I have this really great crystal that's sort of this olive green color. I've got this really great blue bead that's actually soft. I'm not really quite sure what the material is, but I love the shape and I love the size of it, and especially the color is just perfect. I've got a link that you can use. It doesn't have to be a link per se. Again, I just kind of took these out of my personal bead stash, but you could certainly use some other beads that you have left over in this color turquoise if you want to, or if you do happen to have a link, this is going to be the perfect spot for it. And then I've got this other little crystal here in sort of a fuchsia color. So one thing I did remember that I wanted to express was having a variety of textures within your design. Here I've got two very glossy beads. They're very glassy and very shiny, as you can see. But I tried to also think conscientiously about how to balance out some of those textures. So I did pick something soft and matte to kind of space between my two glossy beads. And then I've got something that's stone, so it's kind of got like a satin finish. So all to say that I've got a variety of textures and colors to present within my design. And that's something that I want you guys to carry away with you too. Let's see, I have got some wire. I'm going to be predominantly using the 20 gauge wire for making a series of wire wrap loops. And then I'm going to be also using 26 gauge to create some embellishment, especially on that blue bead that I have there, just to give it a little bit more interest and additional texture to bring into my design. So have those two wires out, and let's start connecting some of these things together. So let me pull these things off to the side. Now, the first thing I want to work with is my jewelry chain, which is this stuff right here. I want to show you guys what you can do to make a little embellished tassel here. So that's one of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 7 that I'm making, which I already have sort of pre-made there. But I wanted to show you how I go about making that little embellishment there at the end, which is really just a wire wrap loop with a bead. But it's perfect, especially if you're stacking many of them together. So at this point, I just have my head pin that I strung my crystal on. Again, this is just some crystals that you can pick out of your stash or cut off from your beaded chain. Totally up to you. I'm going to go in with my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to just create a 90-degree angle bend with that head pin, just like that. And then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers. Your round nose pliers are very special because they taper toward the end. So the further you go down into your pliers, the larger your loop is going to be, right? So I want this loop to be fairly delicate and small. So I'm going to use the tip of my pliers to go ahead and fold that wire around. When you get to a certain point, your wire will want to stop because it's going to be wonky if you continue. So I really just lift off my pliers and insert it into the second bottom mandrel there, and then just finish out my loop that way. Sometimes your wire will want to get off of its 90-degree angle bend, but you just can kind of bend it back and continue forming that loop as you need to. Right now, though, this looks pretty good to me. I do want a little bit of space there because the wraps are going to add a little bit extra embellishment to my design. So I'm going to kind of grasp just the part that's overlapping, and I'm going to press up because I want to create a purposeful little gap there. And this is for that chain that you can cut up into links. So here I have about maybe 2 inches. So every 2 inches, I just cut off a piece of chain, and I'm just using that now to embellish. But once you've done that, you can fold that wire right back down so that it's closely overlapping now, and then you can grasp that loop with one of your pliers, and I'm actually going to grab the other end with my round nose pliers here, and I'm just going to go ahead and coil right around my stem. I'll do this until it hits the bead, which is usually about 3 wraps. And I got lucky this time because it is 3 wraps. And then I'm going to trim this off the best and closest that I can with my pliers there. And then there's always a little bit that sticks out, sadly. So you don't want to hurt anyone that's going to wear this, of course. So what I do is I just pinch that right back in to my coil. And it tends to tighten up my coil and it also tucks it in quite nicely. And if your loop is just a little bit off, you can go back in and kind of fix that as well. And you've got yourself a nice beaded little link there. So the idea here is to make a bunch, which is what I did. I made, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total. So it's going to be a very full tassel here that is going to be very enjoyable to wear. And I'm going to just now lift up, as I did earlier, that loop that's overlapping because I want to insert the rest of my tassel in here. So I'm just going to string that right on before closing out that loop. There we go. Sometimes that chain is a little delicate and hard to see, but it does string right through very easily, as you can see. So now I'll just go ahead and close out my loop here. So as I did earlier, I just made my round loop, opened it, inserted all my chain, and now I'm ready to go ahead and wrap that around. And I want to do this a few times. So that looks really good. Did that a few times, and now I can just trim it. I know it's going to be very strong because I'm using 20 gauge wire. Okay, perfect. So that looks really good. I know, again, it is nice and sturdy and held well. So I can just take a matching crystal and string that right on. This is sort of going to complete the top of my tassel. I just feel like it needed a little sparkle or something up there before I attach it to an element. And speaking of, I think I want to go ahead and attach it to my turquoise link here. So I'm going to set up my wire wrap loop pretty much the same way. Okay, I'm going to insert it into my chain nose pliers and then bend my wire down. So this gives me a nice 90-degree crease. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers. This is usually the part where I think folks have the most trouble because it is hard. It is hard to do this if you're not, if you've not had practice for many years as I have, or an experienced beater might. But I recommend two things. One, which is, of course, to practice. Practice makes perfect. If you practice a little bit every day, I promise you'll just get better and better at it. But also, having a really soft craft wire definitely helps. Trust me. We definitely don't want to hurt our fingers while we're practicing. So that's why, I think that's just one of the reasons why I like to use the Softflex craft wire, because of how soft it is. And especially for a thicker gauge like 20 gauge, it can be a little intimidating thinking about, how thick that wire might be and how much that requires of your fingers to be able to maneuver it and manipulate it and twist it and turn it and stuff. But I will say, because of this specific brand, I do really like it because it is super soft. Okay, I'm gonna continue my twisting and my turning here. Okay, once I got a couple loops here going, I can simply trim this off. And tuck that in. Trim and tuck. That's really all it takes. So one thing I do want to make aware is what the loops are doing when they're sort of facing. If you want your loops to be consistently facing the same way, for example, this one's going sideways and this one isn't, you can absolutely go about it that way. If you want them facing perpendicular, I think that's also possible for this particular design, but I'm going to have them face the same direction for me. Just a nice, solid sideways facing loop there. And I think that'll just lay even more correctly than it could. So the first part of our component there is done. I'm going to continue to work on this. Let's see. I think I want to add my beautiful little fuchsia bead there. So I'm going to grab some more Softflex wire in 20 gauge. I think this will be a great project for you guys that really want to go through your inventory and pick out okay, so maybe this is a summer palette, but what would a fall palette look like? And would these beads down here not be beads, but maybe they're leaves, which would be really cool. Some check glass. I could see some check glass, colorful leaves down there that are wire wrapped. Ah, gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So many possibilities. All right, so I'm going to actually grab a pretty good bundle of wire here to work with. You can even straighten this out with nylon jaw pliers if you wanted to. I think mine's actually came out pretty straight from the spool, luckily, so I'm just going to work with that there. So, same concept here. I'm just going to continue making my little wire wrap loops because I love the idea of how solid this is going to be with those loops. Nothing is going to come apart because we're always a little bit worried about our simple loops, right? Because if they're not formed or touching correctly, they could, become unhinged and suddenly your component is on the floor rather than on your neck. So I think wire wrapped loops are good for that. Okay, there we go. And work this around. Yeah, if I cut a bunch of wire up front, I think I'll be wasting less also. Just because I can work from one end to the other practically. Okay, one thing to note is, did you guys see how I came at an angle when I cut that? It's really great practice to do that because that helps to sort of fold in and taper that little end there. And it basically just disappears into the coil, so as you can see, that worked out pretty well. I'll probably go back and straighten this out a little bit later, the loop down there once I make my second one. So that looks good. Okay. So let's see. Okay, hold it at my plier tip there. Fold it down. Grab my round nose pliers here. And just work it around. Perfect. So I've got nothing here to attach necessarily, so I'm just going to go ahead and wire wrap that. Coil it around that stem. And then on the next component is where I will attach it to the fuchsia. That is important that you remember to do that because I have wire wrapped before and completely forgot to attach it to something. So I had to like undo all of my loops. It happens. It happens to the best of us. Even if you're pro, it does not stop you from making mistakes. Silly ones at that. Sometimes we just get excited and forget, and that happens. Okay, so these loops need to be on their side, so I'm going to just make sure that they're aligned correctly here. So that looks pretty good, I think. Yeah, that looks really good. All right, so we've come upon our blue bead here. So this one's a little special because this is where we're going to take two different wires to create our embellished look. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and make my loop on one end. Okay, just as before, really nice and just work it in nice and easy. And I'm going to start with my top loop so I don't need to attach it to anything just yet. I do love making these loops with 20 gauge wire. I think 22 for me always feels a little bit thinner and more frail, but the 20 gauge is definitely a lot more robust. So in my personal collection of wires, I've pared it down to just 20 and 26 gauge in all the colors. Well, all the colors that match the SilverSilk at least. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and actually make my bottom loop because I'm going to take the thinner wire and use that to embellish around my bead here. Okay, and before I close out this loop, remember we gotta attach it to our beaded pendant down there. And even before that, we need to make sure that our wires are, or our simple loop, or wire wrap loop, excuse me, are well aligned and in the same position before we even get around to the wire wrapping part. So, whoops, let me grab my chain nose, go ahead and bend that in. And then in order for this to lay correctly, it looks like my loops need to be face up front here, so like that. So you can see that everything is now kind of laying correctly, so that's face up. Okay, so once I have that put together, I can grab my 26 gauge wire. This you don't need very much of. You can probably actually just use about a foot. It really just depends on how much you want to embellish. And I know some of you folks out there love embellishing, so I say go crazy once you learn this technique if you want to. And if you want to just keep it nice and simple and minimalist, which is what I'm going to do, you can do absolutely that. No big deal. But since we have some distance in here and here, a couple wire wraps, we're going to use that to our advantage. So I'm going to just take my 26 gauge wire, wrap it around a couple times, and I'm going to then move this to the bottom and wrap that around a couple times too. It's kind of like the herringbone, but not really, because I'm just working from edge to edge here. And again, you can do this as many times as you want. I'm going to go ahead and actually cut this off. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and tuck it in. You see how I went around the opposite way that time? Oh, actually, I want to go on this side. There we go. So you can kind of position these however you like, and then just embellish away. Wire wrap and embellish to your heart's content. And I'm just doing the front side. I'm not doing the back side. So just keep that in mind. Okay. It just adds a little extra texture that I think the bead needs against the matte surface. Although the matte bead is very pretty on its own, you know, more is more. But I think that this adds just enough. It's not over the top. Okay, so once you do that and you kind of are happy with any adjustments or whatever that you need to make, which I think that looks really good to me personally. I think it just adds a little extra, I don't know, jacket to the bead, if you will. You can just kind of wrap it up and trim it. The support is going to be mostly focused on the 20 gauge wire loops and not so much the 26 gauge. So with that being said, because it's not relying on that, it's going to be very much sturdy to hang beads from this particular type of loop style without worrying about the weight. Okay, and now I just need some 20 gauge wire to make that other bead, because we've got one more. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this as much as I am making this. This is so much fun and really satisfying. Okay, so let's make our loop. Okay, and then I just need to attach it to this loop. Press that back down and work it around. Looks like I was able to coil it just perfectly, so I'm going to just squeeze that shut. Make sure that it's nice and secure, and then I'm going to add in my bead there, and then this part's a little different. So let me go ahead and start the beginnings of my loop, because we're going to hit pause on this for just a second, and you'll see why. Okay, I got my loop pretty much set up. I'm not going to use a jump ring to attach my flat mesh and my crimp to the beaded pendant. I'm going to attach it directly. So that's why I had this stop, to make sure that I do this step. Okay, here I have some flat mesh crimps. So these are specifically designed to work with the flat mesh. As you can see, they have teeth that really grasp onto that flat mesh. And guys, when you squeeze this, whenever you have crimped it, there's like no going back. So make sure that you definitely get it right the first time when you crimp, and it's going to be a strong permanent hold. Whenever you do get flat mesh, I like to do a couple things. First is I like to just run my thumbnail and index finger through the chain. This just kind of relaxes it. It kind of takes out any of the kinks or craziness that happens in between shipments. And once that's done, you'll see how well it just relaxes. And then I'm going to kind of just pair these guys together. Remember, we're using 30 inches, and I'm going to overlap them just like that. So what I did was I got out any knots and, twist and turns in it, and now it's going to lay nice and flat to whoever is going to wear it. And I've overlapped it. So having done that, I can now grab my crimp. And if you do trim this, it's going to be the same procedure as whenever you're working with capture chain or pearlesque chain, where you do have to sort of take out some of those wire fuzzies to precondition, as I like to call it, your chain before crimping. So having said that, let's just shake out and see if there's any fuzzies, which I guess there isn't. I must have cleaned these at one point in time. I do have that little piece of wire that I want to clip, though. And let me make sure that on this back side there's nothing. Perfect. So I'm going to now string that right into, or attach it right into my flat mesh crimp. But you could see that, how just lovely that fits in. It's such a perfect fit. So once that's in there, I'm going to take my wide nose pliers that have been dipped in Tool Magic and just give it a squeeze. The Tool Magic protects it from any sort of abrasion or scratches that might happen as you're crimping and pressing on it. I can literally just press this and completely go to town with it and not have to worry about my finding getting scratched at all. It's perfect. So now that that is all set up, I can go ahead and string this into my beaded pendant here. Okay, so I'm just going to lift up that wire, slide this right in. It doesn't matter if it's logo face up or face down at this point, since the beads can be really worn from any direction. I think that also makes it an exciting piece to wear, that you have to, one less thing that you got to pay attention to, right, whenever you're constructing this. So now I can twist that wire around and around and get it all connected. You could even do that wire embellished wrap on all the beads if you're really wanting to go embellishment crazy. Right. So now I can simply make sure that that's all tucked in. And it looks like I got lucky on this one, and my loops are facing the same direction, so lucky me. And that is how you put together this design. And you could see that I have still 3 crimps left over, because a package of flat mesh crimps come in a 4-piece set. And so if you wanted to make multiple necklaces, you absolutely could with this design and technique in mind. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I did teaching it to you. I'm very excited about this design, and it's another great necklace to have in your summer wardrobe for really any occasion, whether you want to dress up or dress casual. If you are looking for even more inspiration tutorials from me, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll want to check out the playlist especially because I have gathered a giant library for each of the different lines of SilverSilk I carry, and you can just tutorial your heart out with watching me on replay, which is a scary thought. But you'll actually learn quite a few things as you're watching the videos too. So, and if that does not satisfy you, you can definitely hit up Instagram for even more inspiration. And on there, I've got reels of how the process behind SilverSilk works. I've got a ton of examples on there for inspiration and eye candy, and it's a great place to follow my journey and my business. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you, and I will see you again at the next tutorial, and I love you guys so much. Mwah!